Hey, it's Mr. Veve. We're going to talk about human impact on the environment. So in our first key concept, we're talking about environmental change and how it can impact an ecosystem stability. And so specifically, we're going to talk about the things that humans do that impact the environment. So Earth's human population is continuing to grow. We're actually in an exponential phase at this time. And the orange part that you see that curve there is actually what's projected, although we don't really know. It's just kind of best guess. Maybe at some point we're going to reach a carrying capacity. And the problem is here, as we continue to grow in this exponential way, we're exerting a lot of pressure on our natural resources. So this is a scary thing. We don't know where the carrying capacity is. Maybe we're overshooting it as we speak. So let's talk about some of the Earth's resources that are having a pressure put on them. We've got non-renewable resources. That's one of them. Those are things like coal, oil, fossil fuels. Those are actually used faster than they are formed. They take millions of years to form, and we're actually using them up a lot faster than that. Next one we're going to talk about is renewable resources like wind, water, and sunlight. They can't be used up, and they can actually be replenished without human intervention over time. Okay, so one thing humans have a great impact on is air quality. So pollutants accumulate in the air from basically the burning of fossil fuels and things like that. So we have a very sad-looking polar bear here. We're talking about things like smog and climate change and greenhouse effect that all are related to the air quality. So let's look at something like greenhouse effect a little bit more closely. The greenhouse effect is when sunlight hits the Earth. Some of it gets reflected back out, and some of it is trapped in heat. The Earth actually lets off radiation as well, and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere trap the radiation and the warmth in the Earth. So you can see in the picture here, those greenhouse gases like CO2 help trap that heat from the sunlight that comes in. So very little of the sunlight actually escapes the more greenhouse gases we have in the atmosphere. So we can see why this is such a problem. So now let's talk about water quality. So pollution can put entire freshwater ecosystems at risk here. So an indicator of how good our water quality is looking at different species and how they interact. So different ecosystems that have aquatic portions to them. Okay. Now the next thing is biological magnification. This is actually the accumulation of toxins in a food chain. And this will be very, very clear to you. So if there is a toxin that is present in about 0.025 parts per million, that's the ppm there, in phytoplankton, well, that's going to be magnified by zooplankton, which eat phytoplankton. So the zooplankton doesn't eat just one phytoplankton organism and get that same amount. It eats many of them, and therefore it has a higher parts per million of that toxin. Something like a smelt, a small fish, is going to eat lots of zooplankton, and so the parts per million rises again, all the way up to birds, seagulls, herring, anything like that. So that biological magnification of that toxin gets higher and higher and higher because those consumers eat more of the consumers below them. Next is acid rain. So when we burn things like fossil fuels, we let out dangerous gases into the atmosphere, and these get dissolved into the water that is dissolved up in the atmosphere that then rains back down on us in the water cycle. So these dangerous gases can actually reduce the pH, making it more acidic of the rain. So if you look at acid rain, its pH is around 4.6 versus a normal rain, which is about 5.6. That's because there's a greater amount of hydrogen ions in that rain. And this can cause damage to lots of things that require the water cycle. So freshwater lakes and everything that require that rain from the water cycle to survive, you can actually make those conditions more acidic and things like these fish die. Next thing we'll look at is habitat fragmentation. So this occurs when you have a barrier that forms within a habitat. It's usually because of us, because this whole thing is about us. So something like a road, you put in a road going through what used to be a forest or a grassland. Now you have cut off part of that habitat from the animals that used to use it. So something that some countries do when they build new roads is they leave these big, huge green bridges to where the animals can still cross over from one side to the other, something to consider in the future. So the last thing we're going to look at is some introduced or what we call invasive species. So these are species that are brought to an ecosystem by humans either on purpose or by accident, and that they disrupt the natural relationships within an ecosystem. So there's three that we're going to look at a little bit more closely. First one is Burmese Python. People get these as pets and then they actually get loose And so they were introduced first in the Florida Everglades. Problem is they feed on the native population, including some of these endangered birds, so they're kind of throwing off the stability there. The second one we're going to look at are mice. So mice were not native to Australia, and they were introduced there. The problem was they started eating crops that caused millions of dollars worth of damage. And mice reproduce very rapidly, so they're very difficult to get rid of. And the last one is a kudzu plant. And this was introduced in the southeastern U.S. because people thought it looked really nice. It had a nice pattern to it. Looked kind of like ivy, and so they wanted to make their gardens and houses look really nice. Problem was, it blankets very quickly. It kills a lot of trees and shrubs in the area and a lot of native plants because it just takes over all of the resources. So those are 3 invasive species that you should know.